10.2, we're talking about displaying data, different kinds of graphs, and we started this last time. I mentioned 10.2 and 10.3 are really all one massive section of material. So here's the second half of this one. You will need a protractor today. I'll get those out when we get to that point. If you don't have one, it's fine. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But we're going to actually pick up with bar graphs. Now, we had done kind of a type of bar graph last time. Specifically, we had done something called a histogram. Histograms do have bars. But a histogram is not what we mean when we say a bar graph. I know there's bars, but it's not a bar graph. So a histogram has bars that are connected to one another, okay? A bar graph will have disjoint or disconnected bars. That's the primary difference. What does that mean in terms of information? Well, a histogram is usually used for data that's on a continuum. So grades, the way that we've described them here, actually make a lot of sense to be done as a continuum of values. But if you talked about grades in terms of letter grade, they're distinctly different categories of things. That would be something that we would represent with a bar graph. Now, grades is one of those ones where we can kind of go in either direction, but other things are not. For example, if you talked about your classification, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, right? Your classification, or even more specifically, if you looked at a high school or a junior high or elementary setting where you've got different grades, right? You can't be in grade 1.5. Right? I mean, it's 1 or it's 2 or it's 3. Those are categories that are completely disjoint. You can do that with gender, male, female. There's not a continuum. It's one or the other. You can do it with they'll sometimes do it, at least the way that they ask the information is from the standpoint with surveys where they ask for your race, right? And they force you to put a specific category. It's a little bit more continuum-y than they want you to believe, but they ask you to pick a category, right? You know what I'm talking about, yeah? So these are what we're actually going to be looking at when we look at bar graphs, things that are categorical data, okay? Much like histograms, but the spaces are in between to represent a distinction between categories of information. So we're going to use the same set of information. That is to say, we're still going to do it for grades, but we're going to think about the grades from a category kind of standpoint, as in letter grades of A, letter grade of B. So imagine you're looking at the end of the semester, the end of the year, the end of the 9 weeks, whatever it is, and you're actually assigning a letter to that continuum of values. And so that's what we're looking at now, okay? So we have our same set of data that we had before when we created our histogram, and we're going to create a bar graph for this now instead of creating a histogram. So when we created our histogram, this is what it looked like, and it's going to look a lot like this. We're just going to have space in between the 60 and 70, the 70, 80, right where the 80 is. All those are going to have a little space between them. And instead of labeling them by the numbers, we're going to label them by the letter grade they represent. Okay? So it's going to look like this. So when I make my marks here, again, you can go from A's down to D's if you want, or you can go from D's up to A's. Because I already did D's to A's, that's what I'm going to go with. So this right here is going to be one of my letter grades. Actually, make it a little bit bigger. And then there's going to be this tiny little space before I get to the next one. And again, my bars should be the same, approximately, at least the same width. The spaces in between should be approximately the same amount of space in between. And I have 4 letter grades, so I need to have 4 bars. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's my 4 bars. I didn't need that last mark. Okay, and we write down that these are our letters. So this is the letter D, the letter C, letter grade C, the letter grade B, and the letter grade A. And these are grades. So we label our axes. Our vertical axis is still frequency. And just as a reminder from last time, you can mark the frequency on this one because the numbers are so small with a hash mark for every frequency value. I tend to label about every other one just because it becomes kind of hard to read and write it all in there if I label every one. So I'll label mine as every other. If you had a bigger number of frequencies, like larger frequencies, you could certainly label every 5th one or something like that and make hash marks that represent it that way. So on ours, we did before, we've done this frequency table before, In fact, if you look back at, we did the frequency table over here. We can go from this. So that letter grade of D over here at the beginning has 3 values in it. The letter grade of C has 2. B's have 4. And A's have 9. So we're going to make bars representing those heights. So I'm going to make my bars look a lot like last time. So this is a bar of height 3. A bar disjointed from the other one of height 2. A bar disjointed, of height 4. And then I've got a bar of height 9. So that's my hardest one to draw with the way my screen looks. But I think we're okay. It's all right. So it doesn't look a whole lot different, but I mean, that makes sense. My data set wasn't any different, right? You could actually create this so that it had, more letter grades, like if you had pluses versus minuses. Or some schools will have pluses and they won't have any minuses. So they only represent sort of the positive, like the exceptional and not the less exceptional A. All those other A's are A's, that kind of thing. So you could represent something like that too if you had data like that. So what am I missing on my graph? A title. I need a title on every graph. What might my title maybe be on this? Yeah, grades from exam 2. I know. You guys say that somebody's going to miss a title or more than one on a test. I just know it. Maybe it's something to write on your note card, right? Go back, make sure I have titles on everything, make sure everything's labeled. Missing labels on the axes often it happens too, actually. So, yeah, just want to reemphasize it every time to remind you. Okay, bar graphs have the ability to be used for comparison. Now, we did one other type of graph that we used for comparison. Do you remember what it was? Stem and leaf plots. Yeah, we did a stem and leaf plot where the data from one side going to the right and the data from the other side going to the left represented different quantities, right? They were a comparison of 2 different exams. We're going to do that same kind of comparison of 2 different exams with a double bar graph. So it's the same idea, and we still have bars representing different things. The difference is that we're going to be putting like the F's next to each other, and then we're going to be putting the D's next to each other, and then we're going to be putting 2 bars for the C's next to each other, and so on all the way up. Now, we know the data that we just created from or not just created, but we just used for the creation of the last one. So I'm just going to jot it down really quick. That this is our second exam ones. We had 3 D's, C's next. We had 2 C's, we had 4 B's, and we had 9 A's. Let's look back and find our first data, our first information. We'll have to go all the way back to the stem and leaf plot. You can either look at the very first stem and leaf plot, or you can look at the back-to-back one. I'll look at my back-to-back one. So on this one, we actually do have some F's. We didn't have any F's on exam 2, but we do have some on exam 1. So my F's are up here. There's 3 F's, right? I have 1 D, 4 C's. So I'm going to have to go and write some of those down, or I'm going to forget them. So we had 3 F's, 1 D, 4 C's, and then I still need B's and A's. Okay, how many B's do we have? 6 B's and then 4 A's, yeah. So 6 B's and 4 A's. All right, so this is sort of my cheat sheet little piece up here at the top so that I'll be able to use that. All right, so our axes will look just like the last ones have looked. I do need a longer piece on bottom. I'm going to have more bars. The frequency is still the horizontal or the vertical axis. And I do still have grades on the bottom. I'm not going to write the word grades just yet because I want to make my marks for them first. All right, so the first letter grade is the letter F. And so we're going to make this letter F, and we're going to make it kind of bigger than the last ones. I said that, and then I didn't do it. A little bit bigger than the last one I drew. And then we're going to make that little space. And then I need the letter D, and I need a little bit of space. I need for the letter C and a little space. I need for the letter B and a little space. And then the letter A, and I need a little space. Now, each of these I'm going to actually split into two when I draw them. So these, oops, I started with F. This is F, D, C, B, and A. And I'm going to divide each of these in halves, and I'm going to change my color just slightly. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to see it very well later. So I'm going to change it to, I'll just change it to blue, I guess. So my F is going to be divided in half. The D is into halves, C in halves, B in halves, and A in halves. Okay, everybody good so far? I need a frequency. Oh, let me label grades down here, since I mentioned it and didn't do it. These are the grades. If you want to be more specific, you could put letter grades, right? Because this is letters, not numbers. My frequency needs to go up to 9, so I'm going to do much like I did before. I'm going to mark them, but I'm only going to label every other. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8. Whoops, it happens right sideways, I guess. 8 and 10. Okay. So I'm going to draw the bars as we go. So like exam number 1, how many F's were on exam number 1? There were 3. Yeah, so I need to draw a bar of height 3. And I'm going to draw that bar in black, and I'm going to try and draw it a little bit thicker and see if I can get it to cooperate with me to see it a little bit bigger. And we'll shade these in a little bit too. Yeah. The bar for F for the exam 2 is 0. There was no F's. Okay, how about exam 1 D's? There was 1. So I need a bar of height 1. And how about exam 2 for the D's? There were 3, so I'm going to I changed colors, if you'll notice, D. And I'll shade these in colors later, and my bars are not going to be perfectly symmetric, like the same width, but they're supposed to be close. How about C's for exam 1? 4 C's for exam 1? Okay. And how about for exam 2?
2.
Okay. How about B's, for exam 1?
6.
6. That one was my larger one. Oops. And B's for exam 2? 4. Okay, A's for exam 1?
4.
4. And A's for exam 2?
9.
9. Okay, that's close anyway. What I would do on my paper, if I were you, is I would shade the bars for each exam a specific color. So I've drawn my bars in red for exam 2, so I'm going to shade all those in red. And then we will shade all the other ones in kind of a gray color since I chose black and gray black. It'll be black when I fill it in. If you didn't have any colors with you and you didn't want to do like this, you could do your shading in different directions. Like one of them could go from, top down, like diagonally like this, right? And the other one could go diagonally like this. So you could shade like that too if you didn't have colors to shade with, and that would work. Okay, so this is one of those places where we need a key because obviously we're comparing something. What is it? And which bar represents what quantity, right? And so we need a label for the key. We need a key for this. So we've got one set of boxes that are these red color and shaded in. and I've got one that this black color and shaded in. It doesn't really matter which one you label first or second, but they both need to be labeled. Okay, so what was the red? Yep, exam 2. And black? Exam 1. And I still need a title for this one as well. So this is the, I'll say actually comparison. This time, comparison of scores on exam 1 and exam 2. Something like that anyway. Okay, is that all right? All right, let's get the information about pie charts first written down, and then I'll get the protractors out so we can draw them. Okay, so a circle graph or a pie chart, we use those words, those phrases interchangeably, consists of a circular region partitioned into disjoint segments. So think pizza, right? Think of a pizza. The graph does a really good job of showing how parts are related to a whole. So this graph here and this graph here, they don't show parts related to the whole. They show a comparison of the different parts, right? So if you think about, like, we've been talking about odds and probability. We talked about ratios back before. All these are connected ideas, all right? They're all connected. This graph does a really good job of showing part-to-part ratios. They do a really good job of showing odds if there were only 2 categories, okay? Over here, when we do pie graphs or pie charts, they do a really good job of showing a part-to-whole kind of a ratio. Yes, you can compare the individual slices of the pizza, or the pie, right? But that's not really the point of that kind of a diagram. They're trying to show how much of the whole is represented by that quantity. All right, so we're going to create a pie chart or a circle graph for the same second exam data that we had before. And we need a little bit of information worked out before we do that. In particular, we're going to write down the data that we had from that grouped frequency distribution. I'll do it down from A to D. Do you remember how many A's that we had? Actually, I had it over here, didn't I? How many A's were on exam 2? We're all using exam 2 stuff.
No.
There were 9. That's going to be the numerator of a fraction. We'll fill in the denominator in a minute. How many B's were there?
4.
4. Again, numerator of a fraction. How many C's?
2.
And how many D's?
3.
3. All right, so how many total scores were there?
18.
18. That's the denominator of all my fractions. Right? We're comparing the part to the whole. Each of these are parts of the whole 18. So far, so good? Okay, grab a calculator. We want to do 2 things here. We want to take each of these fractions. Some of them are really easy to see it, I know. But we want to take each of these fractions and we want to find the corresponding percentage. So how do we find a percent when we're given a fraction? Well, we divide it, right? So you have your calculator do the division. And then you multiply it by 100. So if I did 9 divided by 18, and then I multiply by 100, what do I get?
50.
We get 50%. So on this part of the table, if you will, I'm kind of making a table. This is the percent column, right? Okay. The next one, 4 divided by 18.
22.
Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use whole percentages. So you're just going to round to whatever the whole number is. That doesn't mean it's always going to work out perfectly. But that would give us 22%, right, Kate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about 2 divided by 18?
11.
Yep, 11%. And then 3 divided by 18.
17.
Okay. And in a perfect world, if these had all been nice, pretty values, or the rounding just worked out perfectly, it would all add up to 100. That doesn't always happen. This one does add up to 100, I think. Does it? 100%? Yeah. But sometimes it might add up to 101 or to 99. I mean, that's going to happen occasionally. It's not something to be too concerned about, but just to be aware. Okay, so that's my percent column. The next column I need is my degree column. Okay, so how do I get the degree column? Well, I take that same ratio, 9 over 18, and instead of doing the division and multiplying by 100, I do the division and I multiply by 360. And I do that because there's 360 degrees in a circle, okay? So we're going to figure out how much this is of a circle in terms of degrees. So if you take 9 divided by 18 and you multiply by 360, what do you get? 180 is it. 180 is a very nice value. We'll work with that one well. The next one, 4 divided by 18 multiplied by 360. 80. The next one is 2 divided by 18 multiplied by 360. Yep. Addie's got all of them for us today. And how about 3 divided by 18 times 360? 60 degrees. Okay, we need both of these columns of data in order to be able to create our circle chart, okay? So I'm going to shrink mine up a little bit so that I have some more space at the bottom. And what I want you to do while I get protractors handed around is I want you to, if you don't have one, borrow Lauren's cup. You can borrow mine as well. And you're going to trace the bottom of the cup to create you a circle on your paper, okay? So if you would like mine, I will bring it over here, and then aside from Lauren's, or you can use yours back there, Lindsay, that's fine too. You're just going to trace it to make a circle, okay? So everybody needs a circle on their paper. Okay, this is a mix-mash assortment of protractors, so they all work pretty much the same, but they all look a little bit different. If you don't have access to a protractor and you need to take them home this evening till Friday, that's fine. Just make sure they come back, because I'm not the only one who uses them. Dr. Marsh uses them in geometry too, so you don't want to disappear the protractors. Okay, and there's my circle. Okay, you ready? All right. So you're going to be kind of like approximating where you feel like the center of your circle is. We're not interested in finding it super specific exact. Just go ahead and plot where you think approximately the dot should be in the middle. And we're going to go with that. Not only that, but you can actually extend to one side the line segment from that. It doesn't matter where. Okay, now one of these values is the easy one to work with. Which one? 180. Why is 180 so nice? It's half the circle. So you don't really have to work very hard to get that one. You just divide your circle in half, and you call one side or the other the A. I'm going to put my A on bottom. Okay, so you're going to label it with the letter grade, or the category or whatever it is. So if this said dogs, you'd label it as dogs. If this said freshmen, you'd label it as freshmen. I think there's an example in your book where they label different nationalities of people, like America, or not nationalities, but countries. I think they do England, and they do the USA, and they do Italy or something like that. They label countries. So they're just going to label it with whatever the category is. The other thing that you're going to put in this circle is you're going to put the percentage. We don't need the degree measure because you already used the degree measure to make the shading, the shape, right? We just need the percentage. This is 50%. That one would go in there too. Okay, we're going to go with the letter grade B next. So the letter grade B is supposed to be what angle measure? 80. Okay, so if you look at your protractor from the left to the right, I want you to look at the numbers on the inside. They should go up from 0 to 10 to 20 and 30 and so on. Do you see that? Okay, we're using the inside measures because we're going to start with 0 degrees, and we're going to go up until we get to an 80 degree mark. Okay, so your protractor gets lined up like this. There's a dot in the center of all of them with a line that goes straight across. Did you not get one? It's still sitting on Lauren's desk.
I'm so sorry.
She just thought she needed two. Sorry.
I need one.
Asking, oh, over here too. You weren't the only one, Lauren. Callie is also guilty. Okay. So everybody has a dot in the middle. It's not on the very edge, usually. It's actually sort of a little bit higher than the edge. Do you see that? And there's a horizontal line extending to the side of it that lines up with a 0 angle on the right. Okay? So you're going to line that dot in the middle up with the dot of your circle, right there, okay? And the line with the line that you've extended over to the right. And you're going to go all the way up and around until you get to an angle measure of 80 degrees. Now, if your circle, I mean, depending on your size of your protractor, you might be outside of the area of your circle, right? It might be too big or it might be too small. You just make a mark. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to do my best with the protractor on top of a iPad screen. It never works perfectly, but it's not too bad. And so my mark looks like it would be about right here. So you can just make a dot where it is, okay? That's fine. And then you're going to take a straight edge, and in fact you have one. The protractor has a straight edge. And you're going to line the center of the circle up with the dot that you created for your marking out your 80. And you're going to connect them. Now, you don't need to connect them all the way completely if it's outside your circle. You just need to go to the edge of the circle. But the way my tools work, that's kind of how it's going to go. And then I would just erase the pieces of mine that I don't need. So this piece over here represents my letter grade of B for what percentage of the total circle? 22%. Okay. Now, it does matter what I choose next. I can't just willy-nilly decide I'm going to go with the letter D or the letter C. They need to go in order, right? So think about numerical values. Like this isn't, I mean, some data it doesn't matter. If you're doing countries, it wouldn't make any difference what you did next. But there's a numerical ordering to what we're doing here that's going on, right? I've got the A's and then the B's and then I need to do the C's. So my C's are going to be next. So when I line this one up now, the dot is still in the center of the circle, but do you see how my protractor is lined up at the angle? Okay, and the line will go against the line that we just drew for the line of B, for this edge of B, okay? And we're going to go around the circle until I get to what degree measure for my angle, or what angle measure for my sector for C? 11. So as I do this one, I need to make sure I'm marking off 11 degrees for C. That's the percent. 40 is the angle measure. Sorry, I probably said it wrong to think that. Yeah, the angle measure is what I was wanting, not the degree, or not the percentage. 40 degrees. It's about right there for mine. Percentage is 11. And again, we're going to connect the center of the circle to that mark. And I'll erase my extra. And this sector is C. And it's supposed to be 11%. Now the last sector of my circle is D, and it's supposed to be how much?
16.
I think 17, right? It was 16 point something. True? Yeah. So we round it was 17, I think. Did we round it was 17?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so we'll round to 17. But it's a good idea to make sure that this actually works, right? I mean, we didn't measure the last one. It's just the leftovers. It should be an angle measure of what? 60. So you need to make sure it's reasonable, right? Is it going to be perfect? Well, maybe not, but it's going to be reasonable to be 60. And mine actually looks pretty good for that, especially considering I'm on the screen on top of that, the protractor on top of the screen. So we have this particular arrangement. Okay? All right, so let's say, for instance, then, well, we need one more thing on this before I say, for instance, anything. What else do we need? A title. We need a title. So we'll put a title. This is grades on a second exam. Okay. The one other thing that I want to make mention of, because it comes up in the questions asked, is let's say, for instance, you started with this picture. Okay? It has all the percentages marked, and you can see kind of the ratio of things, because of the size of things and the comparison and so forth. And it asks you, okay, Let's assume that we had this disbursement of grades, that 30 people took the test, okay? And we did 18 for ours. We're just ignoring that data for the moment. We're just starting with the picture and saying there was 30 people that took the test. I should be able to figure out how many people got each of those letter grades with that information. How to do that? Proportions is a good way to do that, right? We did proportions in a couple of chapters ago at this point. And so we could actually set them up and you can say, okay, well 50% is 50 over 100. And I have 30 people. And I can figure out how many people got A's. I'll call it A for A's. And I can set up the same kind of proportion, but with each of these percentages, 22 or 11 or 17. And I could find the corresponding number of A's and round appropriately, because if obviously a whole number of people got each of these. And if I need to round, to round up, round down, I'll just use normal rounding rules. Does that make sense? So it does connect back to what we did with proportions before. Good, good.